Do you remember Stadia? Wouldn't blame you if you didn't, because this was an incredibly short-lived cloud streaming platform from Google that tried to revolutionize gaming, but only shot itself in the foot because of how roughly the technology and service launched, because of its business model that had you pay for a subscription, but also pay full price for games that you'd only have access through the cloud, that you couldn't download locally or anything like that, like you can with Xbox Game Pass. And with Game Pass, you just pay a subscription fee and you gain access to a whole library. And speaking of the library, just a general lack of games for Google Stadia. Even now, its library, given how many years the platform's been out, is pretty meager compared to the competition. A lack of promised features and over-reliance on internet connection, and with people having internet data caps or not having speeds that are fast enough to run Stadia properly, it just wasn't a service that appealed to the masses. And so that led to gameplay being stuttery or having input lag or lots of visual artifacting. It's just people are better off playing these games locally. And while there is a niche group of people for whom Stadia has worked wonderfully and the technology is still very cool, unfortunately, its implementation has not proven to be something that the masses have gotten super interested in, which is why less than 2 years after it was announced, on February of 2021, it was announced that Google will be abandoning some of its big plans as a game publisher. Recall that Stadia established their own studios in order to bring first-party titles to Stadia to entice people to partake in the platform, but they gave up on that way too quickly, and after less than 2 years, Google's closing its video game studio, Stadia Games and Entertainment. Jade Raymond, who's a big name in the games industry and was brought on board to lead the internal first-party game developers to shipping some great experiences for Stadia. She left the company after the first-party studios were sent to the chopping block, though Google insisted that they would continue to support its gaming platform. Though the question is for how long. The general sentiment out there right now is that Google is planning to slowly kill off the consumer side of Stadia and instead trying to focus on selling off or renting the technology to companies willing to pay for the cloud service. They said so themselves in the official blog post announcing their shutdown of Stadia Games and Entertainment, when they said that they're going to have an increased focus on using our technology platform for industry partners. Which finally brings us to the latest story that confirms many of our suspicions on how Google is planning to salvage Stadia, salvage being the right word, because the technology as a consumer product is failing. People just aren't subscribing to the service, or not a whole lot of people are buying games on Stadia, so they have to pivot to what Ars Technica here labels as a white label service. So basically, Google now is prioritizing the consumer Stadia aspect and pivoting towards renaming the technology to Google Stream and selling that off or renting that off to companies that need to utilize the back end of Google's cloud technology. And this is a report from news outlet Business Insider that has been transcribed by Ars Technica. And here's what they said. According to the report, the Stadia consumer platform has been deprioritized inside Google and now only takes up an estimated 20% of the Stadia division's time. So while the consumer Stadia subscription and cloud service hasn't been completely shut down or killed off or anything, it's still up and going and there's still some support for it. That support has been significantly scaled down. One has to wonder how long that support will go on for, because this very much feels like Google is backpedaling inch by inch until they're eventually right next to the exit door and are able to say, all right, well, we're shutting down Stadia, okay, bye. And it's not as if Google already doesn't have a track record of unceremoniously shutting down services or endeavors or products. There's like a whole website dedicated to keeping track of all of the services and products that Google has shut down over the years, basically a digital graveyard. But yeah, seeing that the consumer Google Stadia subscription service has been deprioritized and only 20% of Stadia's division's time is going into it just doesn't paint a confident picture for its future, especially when you consider that Stadia just hasn't proven to be a lucrative business venture for Google. And even today, sure, there's some people playing it, but nowhere near enough people to justify financially its existence, so they have to pivot their strategy, and their pivoting is essentially a white level service that has them taking money from companies who want to use their cloud technology, like how AT&T in October released the cloud version of Batman Arkham Knight that was secretly powered by Google Stadia. Google Stadia is very much now behind the scenes cloud technology provider. Google is also backpedaling away from the Stadia name as a whole, calling it Google Stream when selling it to companies. The focus of leadership is now on securing business deals for Google Stream. Ars Technica describes it further as follows: companies that don't want to run their own cloud gaming service could just use Google's back end. Instead of having to deal with making their own cloud technology, they just borrow something that already works pretty well. Google can make some money that way, while game companies can use cloud for certain applications. And there are no branding requirements and no need to plug in Stadia Store or the rest of the Stadia ecosystem. And alongside AT&T, Business Insider reported that there are 3 more potential partners for Google Stream, or 3 potential customers for the service. The companies include Peloton, Capcom, and Bungie. Peloton actually did launch a game through Stadia recently in closed beta last July, a musical rhythm biking game called Lane Break, and you can see what that looks like on Peloton's website. It looks something like this. So basically you get to bike and exercise while also being able to play a game as an entertainment factor to, I guess, keep you motivated. Another potentially good implementation is how Capcom may use the cloud technology to launch a demo site for new titles. So ideally on any device, you can go to some website, click on a link to send you to a demo of a game, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of time. You're just testing the game out, so it doesn't have to run perfectly, and you can kind of overlook the flaws that come with cloud streaming gaming because you're just kind of there to test the game out. You're not using a whole lot of data because it's just a demo. You're not playing for 40, 50, 100 hours. And it's a form of demo delivery that's a lot hassle-free because you don't have to download big files. You can just immediately jump in through the cloud. So this alternative way that the Stadia technology is being utilized is actually a lot better than how they were implementing it through the consumer service, where they were supposed to pay for a subscription and buy games at full price. Full price for a version of the game they can only access through the cloud. Full price for a version of the game that may potentially run worse than it does on other platforms. That's reported to have happened a number of times. And then for games that do release on Stadia and other platforms, because sometimes certain games would come out late on Stadia, they'd be full price on Stadia, but be discounted on other platforms and storefront. So there was just not a whole lot of motivation to get a version of the game on Stadia versus the superior version and the version with more value on other platforms. Google clearly isn't very good at executing Stadia from a consumer service standpoint, so might as well just take the technology, which on its own is pretty good, and kind of allow companies to do what they want with it and allow them to use the technology for their own services. Now, unsurprisingly, all of these reports are worrying existing Stadia users, and Google is trying to paint a positive picture to all of this. So here's a statement from a Google spokesperson, Patrick Sable, that was provided via this Verge article that reads, "We announced our intentions of helping publishers and partners deliver games directly to games last year and have been working toward that. The first manifestation has been our partnership with AT&T, who is offering Batman Arkham Knight available to their customers for free. While we won't be commenting on any rumors or speculation regarding other industry partners, we are still focused on bringing great games to Stadia in 2022. With 200 plus titles currently available, we expect to have another 100 plus games added to the platform this year and currently have 50 games available to claim in Stadia Pro." They tout that like these are impressive numbers, but 200 plus titles currently, so long after launch, that's not an impressive figure. That's still a pretty meager library of games compared to all of the other platforms out there. And cool, 100 plus games added to the platform this year. That's nice, but still doesn't really compare to other platforms. And then they tout the 50 games available to claim for Stadia Pro subscribers. But if you subscribe to Xbox Game Pass, you'll get hundreds of games across both Xbox and PC, including not only a more compelling selection of third-party titles, but also all of Xbox's first-party releases releases which come to Game Pass on day one. And with acquisitions like ZeniMax and Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, it's a far more compelling proposition right there. And now with reports that the consumer Stadia service aspect is being ramped down, it seems clear that no matter how positively Stadia tries to paint all of this to existing subscribers and the existing customer base, there's just not a bright future ahead. But Stadia further reassured the few existing customers with this series of tweets. If you hear one thing, hear this. The Stadia team is working really hard on a great future for Stadia and cloud gaming. We hope you agree, and we know the proof is in the playing. We're particularly proud to be offering 50 games to Pro members in February, with more than 100 titles to join Stadia in 2022, and plenty of free-to-play days for everyone to enjoy. There's also more feature goodness coming to Stadia too, stuff we can't talk about just yet, but we promise to share it when we can. Have a great weekend, Stadians. A great future ahead, says Stadia, but I need to see it to believe it, and all I'm seeing right now is a failing service that is making a major pivot to financially salvage a commercially disastrous product. When it comes to its library of games, Stadia faces issues on two fronts. The first being that there are no unique titles for Stadia. There are no first-party releases for Stadia that make a unique case for maybe trying the service out, as they shut down all of their first-party studios before they even had a chance to spread their wings. And then there's the other aspect of Stadia is already seen as a doomed service, so plenty of big games aren't really releasing on Stadia. For example, Dying Light 2, I don't believe is on Stadia anywhere. I tried looking for it, I couldn't find it, but it is coming out on GeForce Now. So yesterday, one of the biggest AAA releases of February came out on a competing cloud gaming service, GeForce Now, that utilizes existing platforms, existing launchers like Steam, existing libraries of games, and then allows players to take those to the cloud. So this is actually a superior service, and one that makes much more sense. Dying Light 2 is being featured on that platform, but nowhere to be seen on Stadia. So therein lies the other big issue. Even third-party companies aren't keen on releasing their games on Stadia, on spending the time, resources, and money to port their games over to Stadia, because they don't see it as it being worthwhile, because there's not enough of an active consumer base or player base. And that creates a vicious cycle of a lot of major developers not releasing their big games on Stadia because they deem Stadia to be a dying service, or a game might come late to Stadia because they're working on all of these different ports and Stadia is their lowest priority. And while there have been major game releases that have come out simultaneously for all of these other major platforms alongside Stadia, those occurrences are far too rare and far too inconsistent, making Stadia just not the most ideal for people who want to play the biggest third-party releases on day one alongside everyone else. And on the consumer end, that creates the perception that this cloud gaming service won't be supported enough, won't be releasing games enough or at an equivalent rate to other platforms, which makes them leave Stadia and go to other cloud platforms or traditional hardware local gaming platforms, and then that further decentivizes developers from leasing their games on Stadia, which further decentivizes users from sticking with Stadia, and that cycle continues until Stadia kind of becomes irrelevant, which, let's face it now is on the consumer end. So Google is trying to be relevant by just telling other companies, hey, if you need cloud tech, give us some money and you can use our tech. You can do cloud through our backend. So this is a major pivot for this service that was supposed to be this revolutionary new platform that was supposed to take on Xbox and Game Pass and PlayStation and Nintendo and be this thriving gaming ecosystem. But Google has been forced to shift their strategy to just technology rental or technology selling. That seems like the smart strategy at this stage for this technology. I do like the Capcom idea of cloud gaming demos of upcoming games. Stuff like that, I think, is a good use of the Stadia cloud tech, which, as far as cloud technology is concerned, is probably, in terms of how well it runs and stuff like that, is probably the best one out there right now. But good technology and good implementation are two different things. Stadia hit gold on the technology aspect, but had no idea what they were doing on the execution, the service aspect, and that has cost them dearly. I don't see Stadia making a comeback from its current failed state. It's now all riding on Google Stream to be able to sell the technology to enough companies who are interested in it to salvage at least the technology itself. Yeah, it's a desperate move, but probably the correct one at this point. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about the latest developments surrounding Stadia and my take on all of this. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Stadia's prospects for the future, both the consumer subscription gaming service side of things and then the rent out or sell the technology to other companies side of things. Do you think that Stadia will stick around, or do you think it'll slowly die off? That's where I'm leaning more towards. But share your thoughts in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.